Well, hello Art Snackers, we meet again. Welcome back to Hot in the Shop. This is a series in which we take a closer look at some fabulous products that are available in the ArtSnacks shop. This is the first of two videos all about fine line pens. We're going to get creative with some basic techniques and learn how to really use them to our advantage in our drawings. But first, if we haven't met yet, my name is Jenny. I'm a mixed media artist and content creator. When I'm not here on the ArtSnacks channel having a blast with our art supplies, you can find me over at artfullylivedlife.com. Okay, let's get started with our surface. I'm using the Borden & Riley number 234 Paris Paper for Pens pad. Try saying that 5 times fast. It's not just a spiffy pad of paper with a catchy name, it's specifically designed for all types of ink work. Fine line pens in particular glide over the smooth surface of this paper. The lines are crisp and clean without feathering or bleeding. This 9 by 12 inch pad comes with 40 sheets, so you have plenty of space to practice with as well as make finished pieces. Working with fine liners often means paying close attention to detail, which can be time consuming. A 9 by 12 inch sheet is great for bigger projects, but don't be afraid to cut your paper down into smaller sizes. Square formats like 5 inches by 5 inches are perfect for getting an idea down on paper in one sitting. Now, when we're talking about line work, it can seem pretty straightforward. However, I want you to consider this. A line doesn't have to be just a line. Depending on the thickness and the density, you can use lines to convey a lot in your artwork. Not just form and volume, but emotion and character. Let's use these two Edding 1880 draw liners for an example. I have the 0.5mm and the 0.8mm pens, but in the ArtSnacks shop you'll find a total of 7 sizes in the range to choose from. The 0.5 is great for a mid-size draw anything tip, and the 0.8 will give you a thicker, heavier line. Let's play around with some contour lines. These are lines that typically define the edge of an object or surface or plane. You can think of these lines as simple outlines, like on a coloring page, but that's not really using them to their full potential. Let me show you what I mean. Here I have a pencil drawing of an alpaca that I'm going to ink over. I've just drawn the most important contour lines that I thought were necessary to capture the likeness and personality of this animal. I started with the 0.5 Edding draw liner and went over almost all of the lines. It looks fine as is, especially if I were going to color it in with colored pencils or watercolors. But that tuft of hair over his eyes really sticks out there well beyond his facial features. If I make that bottom line of hair thicker by going over it with the 0.8 draw liner, all of a sudden it has weight. It's more pronounced and it indicates that a shadow is being cast underneath it, and we don't even have to shade one in. I'm also thickening up a few other lines, some around the mouth and the neck. And there's hair that's around his ears that kind of jets out as well, so I'm thickening up those lines as well. Now there are a few spaces that have to be filled in rather dark, like the eyes and nostril. Then for the more delicate lines in the face, you know, the ones where the contour is barely visible, like under the eye and under the jaw, I use the 0.5mm pen really lightly and break up the lines so they don't look so harsh. And there you have it. Without doing much shading at all, we can turn a drawing from a flat image into one that appears to have more depth. As we just saw, varying your line thickness can help quite a bit to create dimension when you're working with only pen and paper. But of course there's going to be times when you want to fill in areas with shading. I'm going to swatch out some techniques for you and use 3 different line thicknesses for each one. I'll be using the 0.8 Edding draw liner that I used in the alpaca drawing, but for the 0.5 size tip, I'll be switching to the Winsor & Newton sepia tone fine liner, and the smallest tip will be the Winsor & Newton 0.1 in indigo blue. Now all of these fine liners that I'm showing you in this video are water resistant, non-fading, and made of pigment ink. In this first swatch, I'm using the hatching technique. It's comprised of a series of parallel lines that give the appearance of a shadow. The closer your lines are together, the darker the shadow will appear. Using the large tip, such as the 0.8, results in bulkier lines and may not be suited for smaller artwork. The second swatch is an example of cross-hatching technique. After you've laid down an area of hatch lines or marks, you add a second layer of lines that crosses the first. You can actually add more layers if you like, and at different angles. You'll see as you go on that the more concentrated your marks are, the darker your shading appears to be. Hatching and cross-hatching are some of the easiest ways to add volume to your subject. I'll apply these techniques to this pencil drawing I made of a frog. I love this little guy. I've drawn him before in pen and ink, and I just think these techniques are a good look for him. Not only have I penciled out the contour lines, I've also mapped out some shadows with pencil. This helps when it's time to put in the hatch marks. I'm using the 0.5mm black Edding draw liner for the outline and main features. Then I use the 0.1mm Winsor & Newton Indigo fine liner to make the details. I really like how long the points of the Winsor & Newton fine liners are. Not the tip itself, but the housing. When it comes to these super fine lines, some pens are really bulky toward the tip, and it's hard to see without putting your nose right to the paper. Pens with a long nose like this make it easier to see where you're at. You can see I added some broken scribbly lines for texture on the frog's belly. I do find it pretty easy to zone out while filling in the shadows with lines of ink. If I'm not careful, I can easily go too far with it. That's why the shadow mapping with pencil is so helpful. I'm leaving the highlighted portion of the frog the white of the paper. The contrast between what has been inked and what has been left bare helps the form take shape. It's the contrast that we're looking for between the highlights, midtones, and shadows that really sell the image to the viewer's eye. All of these inking techniques are just tricks to drive the point home. And yes, I do some line shading right over the texture on the belly. I fill in an area of solid black with the Edding 0.8mm draw liner for the shadow his body is casting. I also add just a few hatch marks with this pen to enhance the shadows under his belly and along his side. I did do some more swatches on that other sheet that I will show you at the end, but I think this little illustration of a turtle will be more useful in this video. Once again, I've drawn out my subject with pencil first. There is nothing to say that you can't just start sketching with a pen and forego the pencil. I have certain things I want to cover in this video though, so if I don't draw it out first, things might get a little wonky. There's a time for wonkiness, but this isn't it. For my mid-size pen tip, I'm using the 0.5mm Sepia Winsor & Newton fine liner this time and doing a full outline. I'm using cross contour lines on the bottom shell. Cross contour lines are simply lines that travel across the form. They can be horizontal or vertical, whichever describes the form and volume best. They don't actually have to cross each other like cross-hatching lines do, but they can if that's what represents the form best. I've talked a lot about using pens in a way that represents shadow and highlight. But don't forget that you can use them to create patterns too. You can make them as simple or as intricate as you'd like. I'm using the Indigo 0.1mm Winsor & Newton fine liner to draw in different patterns on our turtle's shell. One of my least favorite techniques is stippling, only because it can take so long. Stippling is just placing dots of color on the page. Where the dots are most concentrated, that's naturally where it looks darker. It's really not hard, but you do have to be present and aware of where you're placing the dots. It's really easy to go a little too far with this one. It's also easy to get a little lazy and all of a sudden your dots become dashes. Remember, all of these techniques are interchangeable. You are the artist, so you can choose what features stay a little more flat looking and what features you want to jump right out with dimension. Your patterns can even have depth, like this flowing pattern. The lines that are closer together and more concentrated naturally look farther away, while the white space between the separated lines look like raised highlights. Once all the patterns are in place, our little turtle looks like he's ready for a party. I did add more cross contour lines for shading under his shell and on his legs, but the camera didn't catch that. Here is the final swatching sheet too, with a nice example of stippling and a few other pattern techniques. I hope you've enjoyed this video. All the supplies I've used today can be found in a link in the description box below. And to get 15% off these select products, just use coupon code HOT15 at checkout. While you're here, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe for more videos, join us for free over on Mix, and follow ArtSnacks on social media.